The current geopolitical landscape demonstrates intensified strategic competition between major powers, with the conflict in Ukraine serving as a critical test case for alliance coordination and strategic effectiveness. The competition between the United States and China has evolved beyond traditional economic rivalry into comprehensive, strategic competition across military, technological, and diplomatic domains. The Ukraine conflict has become a focal point where this broader competition intersects with European security concerns, creating complex dynamics that affect alliance relationships and global strategic balance. This analysis will examine three interconnected elements. First, we will assess the documented patterns of US-China strategic competition and how regional conflicts influence this broader rivalry. Second, we will analyze the military and strategic dimensions of the Ukraine conflict as they relate to alliance coordination and resource allocation. Third, we will explore the implications of current trends for transatlantic alliance relationships and global strategic stability. The structural foundation of US-China competition involves multiple domains where both powers seek advantage and influence. Military competition includes conventional force development, nuclear modernization, and technological advancement in areas like hypersonic weapons, cyber capabilities, and space-based systems. Naval competition centers on control of critical maritime routes, with both powers expanding their fleets and developing new operational concepts for power projection and area denial. Economic competition encompasses trade relationships, technology transfer restrictions, supply chain control, and influence over international economic institutions. The semiconductor industry represents a particularly critical area where both countries seek technological independence while denying advantages to competitors. Critical minerals and rare earth elements create additional competition points as both powers seek to secure reliable access while potentially restricting competitor access. Diplomatic competition involves efforts to secure partnerships with key countries and regions while limiting competitor influence. This includes competition for influence in international organizations, regional security arrangements, and economic partnerships. The alignment of various countries with competing blocs affects global governance, capacity, and crisis management effectiveness. The Ukraine conflict has become integrated into this broader competition through multiple channels. China's relationship with Russia, while complex and sometimes strained, provides an alternative pole of power that challenges Western dominance in international institutions and regional security arrangements. The conflict tests Western capacity to sustain military aid, economic support, and diplomatic coordination over extended periods while managing domestic political pressures and economic costs. Military aid patterns demonstrate sustained Western commitment but also reveal resource constraints and coordination challenges. The United States has provided the largest share of military assistance, including advanced weapon systems like HIMARS rocket systems, Javelin anti-tank missiles, air defense systems, and sophisticated intelligence support and training programs. European allies have contributed significant resources including main battle tanks, artillery systems, and ammunition supplies, but face limitations in defense industrial capacity and military stockpiles that affect their ability to sustain long-term support. The coordination mechanisms for military aid involve complex logistics networks, training programs, and maintenance support that require substantial infrastructure and personnel commitments. Intelligence sharing arrangements have expanded to provide real-time battlefield support while maintaining operational security regarding sources and methods. These arrangements demonstrate alliance integration capabilities while also revealing vulnerabilities and dependencies that affect long-term strategic planning. The resource demands of supporting Ukraine create opportunity costs that affect other strategic priorities. Military aid to Ukraine draws from weapons stockpiles intended for deterrence in other regions, particularly the Indo-Pacific where US-China competition centers on Taiwan and regional maritime security. Artillery shell production, in particular, has struggled to meet demand as consumption rates exceed production capacity across multiple allied countries. This creates tension between immediate support for Ukraine and long-term preparation for potential conflicts in other theaters. Defense industrial capacity limitations have become apparent as Western countries struggle to increase production of artillery shells, missile systems, and other equipment needed to sustain high-intensity conflict. These constraints reflect decades of reduced defense spending and industrial consolidation that prioritized efficiency over surge capacity. Production line modifications, worker training, and raw material sourcing require months or years to implement, creating vulnerable periods during capacity expansion. The timeline for expanding production creates vulnerability periods where sustained conflict could exhaust available stockpiles before replacement capacity becomes available. The strategic context reveals how regional conflicts influence broader great power competition dynamics. Success or failure in supporting allies and partners during crises affects perceptions of reliability and resolve that influence other countries' strategic calculations. Chinese assessment of Western performance in Ukraine likely influences their calculations regarding potential conflicts in the Taiwan Strait or South China Sea, particularly regarding alliance durability under pressure and resource mobilization capacity. Alliance coordination challenges have emerged in multiple areas affecting both immediate conflict support and longer-term strategic planning. European dependence on American military capabilities for intelligence, logistics, and advanced weapons creates asymmetric burden-sharing arrangements that generate political tensions. Different threat assessments regarding priority regions, varying geographic proximity to potential conflict zones, and domestic political constraints affect alliance members' willingness to maintain sustained support levels over extended periods. The financial costs of extended conflict support create domestic political pressures in donor countries that affect policy sustainability. Military aid, economic assistance, and refugee support require significant budget allocations during periods when many countries face economic pressures from inflation, energy costs, and other domestic priorities. These competing demands affect public support for continued assistance and political willingness to maintain current support levels, particularly during election cycles when foreign policy commitments face increased scrutiny. The key variable here often goes unexamined in public discussions. The sustainability of alliance coordination depends not only on immediate military outcomes, but also on the broader strategic competition context and domestic political dynamics in key supporting countries. If the conflict becomes perceived as a drain on resources needed for other strategic priorities, support could erode regardless of immediate battlefield developments or humanitarian considerations. Strategic competition with China affects Western calculations regarding resource allocation and long-term priorities. Military planners must balance immediate support for Ukraine against preparation for potential conflicts in the Indo-Pacific region where different capabilities and strategies would be required. Naval and air power capabilities relevant to Indo-Pacific scenarios differ significantly from ground-based systems needed for European conflict, creating allocation decisions between competing strategic requirements. The economic dimensions of the conflict intersect with broader U.S.-China competition through sanctions, trade relationships, and technological competition. Western sanctions against Russia test the effectiveness of economic pressure tools that might be applied in future conflicts involving China. Russian adaptation to sanctions through alternative payment systems, trade route development, and technology substitution provides lessons for Chinese strategic planning regarding economic resilience under pressure. This creates constraints that shape strategic decision-making in multiple capitals. Extended resource commitment to Ukraine reduces capacity for military modernization programs intended to address Chinese capabilities. Alliance members face choices between immediate conflict support and long-term strategic preparation that affect their overall competitive position in broader strategic competition. Now, the second-order effects become visible in shifting alliance relationships and strategic priorities. European countries have increased defense spending and industrial capacity but remain dependent on American capabilities for key military functions including strategic intelligence, logistics coordination, and advanced weapons systems. This dependence creates vulnerabilities that affect alliance coordination and burden-sharing arrangements during extended crises. The conflict has accelerated European efforts to develop autonomous defense capabilities, including joint procurement programs, industrial cooperation, and strategic planning independent of American leadership. Initiatives like the European Defense Fund and Permanent Structured Cooperation represent attempts to reduce dependence while maintaining alliance integration. While these efforts strengthen overall alliance capability, they also create potential for divergent strategic priorities and reduced American influence over European security decisions. Chinese strategic calculations regarding Taiwan and regional expansion are influenced by observations of Western performance in supporting Ukraine. demonstrated capacity to sustain military aid, maintain alliance coordination, and impose effective sanctions affects Chinese assessment of likely Western responses to future conflicts. Conversely, evidence of resource constraints, alliance tensions, or domestic political opposition to extended commitments could encourage more assertive Chinese behavior in contested regions. The technological dimensions of the conflict provide testing grounds for military systems and concepts that influence broader strategic competition. Western weapons performance against Russian systems provides data relevant to potential conflicts with China, while Russian adaptation and countermeasures inform defensive planning. The integration of commercial technologies, particularly in communications and surveillance, demonstrates civilian-military technology convergence that affects long-term competitive dynamics. Diplomatic coordination challenges extend beyond immediate military support to broader strategic competition management. Alliance members have different relationships with China and varying tolerance for economic costs associated with strategic competition. These differences affect coordination on technology restrictions, investment screening, and other strategic competition tools that require sustained multilateral cooperation for effectiveness. We can identify 3 plausible scenarios for how current trends might evolve based on documented patterns and structural factors. The sustained coordination scenario involves alliance members maintaining current support levels while successfully managing domestic political pressures and resource constraints. This outcome requires continued military aid effectiveness, manageable economic costs, and sustained public support for extended commitments across multiple allied countries. Early indicators for this scenario include successful defense industrial expansion, stable public opinion polling regarding support, and continued alliance coordination without major policy divergences. Military effectiveness measurements that demonstrate progress toward conflict resolution would support sustained political commitment. Economic indicators showing manageable costs relative to overall national budgets would indicate sustainability of current approaches. The resource constraint scenario emerges if extended conflict duration exceeds Western capacity to maintain current support levels without affecting other strategic priorities. This could result from defense industrial capacity limitations, domestic political opposition, or competing demands from other strategic challenges including Indo-Pacific competition requirements. Reduced support levels could affect conflict dynamics while creating opportunities for competitors to exploit perceived Western weakness. Key indicators include defense industrial production shortfalls, significant public opinion shifts against continued support, or explicit statements from alliance members regarding resource limitations. Military aid reductions or delays in promised deliveries would signal movement toward this outcome. Political leadership statements emphasizing need to prioritize other strategic challenges would indicate shifting priorities away from current commitments. The strategic realignment scenario involves fundamental changes in alliance relationships and strategic priorities, driven by lessons learned from current conflicts. This could include enhanced European strategic autonomy, reduced American commitment to European security, or shifts in resource allocation toward Indo-Pacific competition. Such changes would represent significant departures from current alliance structures and burden-sharing arrangements. Indicators for this scenario include major European defense industrial initiatives independent of American participation, explicit American strategic pivot statements, or fundamental changes in alliance command structures. Enhanced European-Chinese economic cooperation despite American opposition would signal potential strategic divergence. Major shifts in military deployments or base arrangements would indicate structural alliance changes. Each scenario carries distinct implications for global strategic stability and competitive dynamics. Sustained coordination would demonstrate alliance resilience while potentially constraining resources available for other strategic challenges. Successful coordination could deter future aggression by demonstrating Western capacity for sustained collective action under pressure. Resource constraints could encourage more assertive behavior by strategic competitors while forcing alliance members to make difficult choices between competing priorities. Evidence of Western inability to sustain extended commitments could affect deterrence calculations in other regions and encourage testing of alliance resolve. Strategic realignment could create new competitive dynamics with uncertain stability implications. Enhanced European autonomy could strengthen overall Western position through increased burden sharing, but could also create coordination challenges and potential for policy divergence. Reduced American commitment to European security could free resources for Indo-Pacific competition but might also create security gaps that competitors could exploit. Our analysis reveals several confirmed patterns alongside significant uncertainties. Alliance coordination in supporting Ukraine has demonstrated substantial capacity for collective action while also revealing resource limitations and coordination challenges that affect long-term sustainability. The integration of regional conflicts into broader strategic competition creates complex resource allocation decisions that affect overall competitive positioning. The relationship between immediate conflict outcomes and broader strategic competition remains uncertain, as both success and failure in Ukraine could influence competitor behavior in unpredictable ways. Alliance members' capacity to sustain current commitments while preparing for other strategic challenges depends on factors including domestic political support, economic performance, and defense industrial development that remain variable. The effectiveness of current strategies in achieving stated objectives requires extended timeframes to assess, during which strategic conditions and competitive dynamics will continue evolving. The interaction between alliance coordination, resource constraints, and strategic competition creates ongoing tensions that affect policy sustainability and strategic effectiveness. We will continue monitoring confirmed policy changes, resource allocation decisions, and strategic competition developments as they emerge. The relationship between regional conflicts and great power competition provides insights into contemporary security challenges and alliance management in an era of intensified strategic competition.